On Friday, U.S. politicians approved a $9.7 billion aid relief bill for the victims of Hurricane Sandy. But that's just a fraction of what was requested. The aid package was delayed after a bitter partisan political battle. A conservative group in Washington, D.C. says that the bill contains too much wasteful spending and that the money is going to the wrong places. Barney Keller, Communications Director for the Club for Growth, joins us now from Washington. Thanks for taking time to speak with us today, Barney.
Brian, great to be with you.
You know, at first blush, when people see that you're coming out against an aid package to remedy the devastation caused by Hurricane Sandy, people are kind of scratching their heads. Can you clear this up for us?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think your viewers need to understand that our position is that the people that were directly affected by Sandy, the victims, should get the relief that they need. But here's the thing. Whenever there's a disaster, a natural disaster occurs, Congress follows the same playbook. They pass a giant spending bill that isn't paid for, there's no accountability or oversight, and it's loaded with pork. And that's exactly what's been happening in the Congress the last couple of months. Initially, the Senate tried to pass a $60 billion bill that was loaded with pork projects like refixing the roof of the Smithsonian Museum here in Washington, $150 million for Alaska fishermen. And again, with $16.4 trillion in debt, we can't just keep adding more money to that and borrowing from China to pay for it. We're just asking Congress if they're going to spend the money, parcel it out in smaller packages so that we can make sure that there's accountability oversight, localize that oversight, and make sure that it's paid for. We shouldn't keep using disasters as an excuse to just keep adding more and more money to the debt. Well,
I certainly can't argue with you on that point there, Barney, but let me ask you this. I'm not an expert on American government, but I do know a couple of things. And aren't bills like this sent to an oversight committee to be approved?
No, they're not sent to an oversight committee to be approved. In many cases, these bills come up with only 24 hours to be viewed. The one that passed yesterday was released on, I think it was released on a Thursday and voted on a Friday, or it was late Thursday night and voted on Friday morning. And it just added $10 billion in unpaid for expansion of the National Flood Insurance Program. In America, our flood insurance program is subsidized by the government. It's not run by the free market, which is why it had reached its statutory lending cap and it needed a $10 billion bailout. And, when we're talking about, we have a $1 trillion national deficit that we run yearly here. We've been talking about fighting a $4 trillion debt reduction package. People have been focused on our debt. So the idea that we can't offset $10 billion by finding spending cuts elsewhere, is really troubling. And again, we're just asking for people to spend money responsibly. We're not asking for, we want the people that are supposed to need the money to get the money. But what we don't want is for Congress to just write a blank check like they always do, where nobody pays attention to how it's spent. And there are lots of ways that they could remedy the situation.
Well, Barney, let me ask you a question, because obviously you've been watching this developing situation quite closely. Is there a parallel here with what happened with Hurricane Katrina? Because we've talked to people about what happened in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. I'm talking about here. The volume of malfeasance and overspending was legendary. Is that what we're talking about here?
I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid by pushing for Congress to vote no, or to at least have offsets. You're absolutely right, Brian. The Club for Growth also opposed the Katrina relief bill because it wasn't offset. And after they passed this $50 billion, I think it was, package, then you've heard all sorts of stories about trailers that they bought that were just left unused. They gave everybody these debit cards that were used for emergency life-saving things. In this bill, in the $60 billion bill that they tried to pass through the Senate that died, they were talking, included in that was $30 billion for future disaster mitigation projects, things like rebuilding levees or constructing roads to avoid future disasters. And that's all well and good, but that's not emergency spending. That's not going directly to somebody whose house was destroyed by Sandy and is left on the street. That's not going to put on turn on power or heat for a senior citizen. That's just pork and wasteful and spending that should be considered under regular order, under the statutory budget caps that Congress agreed to last August, and should be offset with spending cuts elsewhere. Our overriding view is that America faces two choices. We can either be Europe, where we just pay for things and worry about the cost later, or we can be America, where we say, what do we need? What do we need out of our government? And what are we going to actually pay for, and how are we going to pay for it? And we're hopeful that Congress will, by pushing Congress to block this Sandy relief bill, or at least causing people to think before they vote. And that's really the goal of our organization.
Well, Barney, we need a little bit of clarity on this, and we thank you to bringing that to this topic for us.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Happy New Year. That was Barney Keller, Communications Director at the Club for Growth, and he joined us via Skype from Washington, D.C.